So this is the first little clip that I'm doing to document how this Hamburg project really begins. And what I'm doing now basically is just planning the project in the most basic form with just looking at what materials I'm going to use and how many paintings I want to do, which locations, how I'm going to do it time wise, make a schedule out of it. And I guess this will be part of uh, a thorough documentation of the entire project. And I don't know if I'll be posting this specific clip in a larger video format, but we'll see about that. And yes, I'm really excited about it, to be honest. Let's see where it ends up. In my last video, I talked about beginning a year-long project to paint a portrait of Hamburg, the city I called home for more than 10 years. But once I had announced the project, I started thinking about everything I wanted to include, and I was left with a very simple question. How do I actually start? And where do I begin when the project is an entire city? So I can't really work particularly well without some sort of plan. So I decided to divide this year-long project into a series of 2-week blocks. And each block will focus on a different part of Hamburg, or different parts of Hamburg, and will involve exploring that area, taking pictures or reference photographs, writing notes, and making sketches. And the idea is to gradually collect enough material for me to develop into paintings at some point. For now, however, I'm not really concentrating on producing finished works. The first phase is more about observation. I want to understand what I'm trying to capture, which subjects genuinely interest me, and what could make the series feel as personal as possible. I'm considering having a more intensive painting phase during the middle and later parts of winter, when the sky is at its grayest and the weather makes it much more difficult, for me at least, to spend hours cycling around the city. I don't know, I just find that very uncomfortable and maybe not practical. But before I can paint anything, I need to learn how I want to look at it. The first block covers Barmbek. That's the neighborhood where I live, and some parts of the city park, or in German, the Stadtpark. And I deliberately decided to begin nearby because nowhere else in Hamburg feels more like home to me than the neighborhood where I live. I think that's a bit obvious, but these are the streets I walk through most often. They are where I do the most ordinary and everyday things like buying groceries or going for walks, or this is where I mostly start my journeys whenever I take the train. And the Stadtpark, or the city park, is also my park of choice, not to mention my favorite park in the world. Not only because it's beautiful, because it's so close to home as well. And it's also the nearest large pocket of nature I have, and somewhere I can visit without really needing to plan for it. I can just walk there and I'll be there in, I guess, 20 minutes, or take my bike and be there in 5. In a way, beginning here made sense for me, but it also presented the first real challenge of the project, which is I'm so accustomed to these streets that it can be difficult to find the angle that transforms an everyday location into something visually interesting. But with the park, that's a bit different, because whenever I'm there, it's easy for me to feel impressed by the many different corners of the park. The nature, the light, and the open views never really become boring for me, so yeah. But the surrounding streets are a bit more difficult. That's where it's a bit trickier, and it's exactly that question that I want to explore while doing this first block. Or I guess I'll be exploring it in the next blocks as well. But how do I turn the places I see every day into something personal and interesting? And what better way to start that search for that answer than using my bike? Because I think my bike will become, and is already, a central part of this project. It is how I have experienced Hamburg most directly, to be honest. Whenever I can, I take my bike, and unless it's rainy or really raining and the streets are too wet, or in winter when it gets icy, I take it. And cycling allows me to move through the city at my pace and lets me observe it a bit better than taking the subway or the metro, whatever you call it. I mean, I also use that one, and I would use it before using a car, but the bike to me has been very special for the last 10 years or so. Something you might notice is that the light in the video clips is not the same as the light in the photographs, and the footage probably shows a more realistic version of what Hamburg is, cloudier, cooler, and not quite as summery as it appears in the photographs. But both are part of the summer experience here. You can have a bright, sunshine, sunny day with warm weather, and the next one will be gray and cloudy, or more likely most of the following days will be gray and cloudy, sometimes with rain. But that's the way it is. And I also decided not to take the photographs and record the film at the same time, because I'm really bad at multitasking. And when I went out to collect the references, I wanted to concentrate fully on observing and photographing what was around me, instead of diving into also making clips that were interesting to me. And to be honest, that divides my attention in two very different ways that I'm not really good at managing at the same time. During this first tour, I was looking for compositions, light, movement, people interacting with their own surroundings, and images that felt connected to my own experience of the city. And I ended up taking a lot of photographs, a lot of them. And some of them were okay, some of them were good. Many were probably very useless, or I guess not useless, but not that great. And only a few genuinely captured something close to what I'm looking for this project. So one of the things that I pay the most attention to is the light. Not only when I'm painting, but when I'm taking photographs as well. Because I really believe that light dictates the character of a location or a person or whatever subject you're dealing with. And for example, on sunset during summer, if it's sunny, it can look very warm and inviting, but the next day, if it's rainy and cloudy, it can look really distant and even quiet, even if there's people around it. So I have to pay a lot of attention to that. And once I begin observing the light, I naturally start thinking about the composition, which would be the next step. So I ask questions like, from which angle does the scene become more interesting? Where should I put the main subject? What is the light doing to the subject? How is it interacting with it? And after that comes perhaps the most important question. What is the story of the image? What am I trying to say with this image? What am I actually trying to show the viewer? One photographic element that I actually find very valuable is movement. Long exposures can turn moving lights or moving objects into almost automatic brush strokes, if that makes any sense. They break the static appearance of a location and make the photograph feel slightly closer to a painting. And the same thing happens with reflections, unusual shadows, distorted shapes, or almost anything that brings a small degree of abstraction into the image. Those elements give me somewhere to begin, moving away from a purely literal representation of the place. It's kind of like a bridge between the photograph and my imagination, if that makes any sense. But at this point, like I said, I'm not searching for one perfect photograph, it's just collecting possibilities. After returning home, I look at the pictures that I took and ask whether any of it really communicates the things that matter to me. And at this stage, I'll just start selecting and sorting them out. And I'll start thinking about which images make me want to continue looking at them, which ones contain something I could develop into a painting, which ones actually support the experience I'm trying to express and which ones are merely good pictures. And that distinction is important because a beautiful photograph doesn't automatically need to become a painting. Sometimes the composition works perfectly fine as a photograph, but doesn't give me enough reason to reinterpret it into a painting or a drawing or a sketch. And to be clear, when I mean processing an image, I don't mean opening some software and then editing that image. I actually don't edit them at all when I'm using them as a reference. I just mean looking at it and thinking about the composition in my head and what elements need to go or what elements I want to modify or even add to the composition, and which elements will allow me to convey a message in the best way possible. That's what I mean by processing an image in my head. I don't mean editing it on a software. Other images might initially appear less impressive, but might contain a particular gesture, reflection, or a color, or basically capture an atmosphere that gives me something to work with. And that's much more valuable than having a very nice photograph that I can't really do much with. So the selection process isn't only about identifying the technically strongest photographs, it's also about finding those images that leave room for further interpretation. There was one moment I captured that I immediately knew would become part of the selection, because I felt very drawn to the light, the composition, the colors, and the subject itself, and it seemed to contain many of the things that I had been searching for during this first block. So I decided to make a small sketch from it and see whether the idea would work in Paint. And as I mentioned before, I'm not trying to produce finished paintings just yet, because I don't have the space nor the materials I will eventually need for the proper paintings. So this sketch is simply, I guess, another reference or experiment, a way to see what happens when I translate one of these photographs into Paint. And I chose this particular reference because it captured the warmth of summer. It's those few days that we get that are actually very warm and that feels like you're somewhere else completely. And it makes it feel even more special because I noticed that whenever we get them, people are outside for a long time and they make use of it as much as they can. And they go to the parks, they go to the canals or the rivers or whatever water opportunity they might get and swim and do picnics or barbecues or just any sort of outdoor activity, which makes these few days very, very special, I think. And I think they, like I said before, they form part of the summer experience here in Hamburg. Unlike, I don't know, a place with a lot more sun, for example in Spain, where I can imagine that the summer becomes much more intense, and it's definitely a different experience than it is here. The image also includes one of the most recognizable symbols of the city park. That makes the location somewhat identifiable, or I guess immediately identifiable to people that know Hamburg, while still connecting to a very personal part of my own experience. So I think that is the balance that becomes one of the most difficult things about this project. So while working on the sketch, I wasn't trying to reproduce every detail of the photograph. I was mainly interested in testing the composition, the relationship between the colors and the feeling created by the light, and I wanted to see which elements were essential and which ones could be simplified or removed. And that is exactly the point of making a sketch before committing to a larger painting, because it allows you to have space to experiment without feeling like every decision you make is permanent. And the result doesn't have to be perfect. It never has to be perfect. Even when you're finishing the final painting, it doesn't have to be perfect. It only needs to teach you something or make you feel something. And in this case, this sketch helped me confirm why I was initially attracted to the photograph. And exactly what I said before, it wasn't only the recognizable location, but it was also the combination of the warm light, the open space, the colors, and the feeling of spending a summer day in a place that has become part of my everyday life for the past 10 years or something. So in a way, the landmark identifies the location, but the atmosphere is what makes it personal. after completing this first block, I think the project has a ton of potential. And the main question still remains as how I can communicate my experience through these subjects in a way that allows other people to feel connected to them. I don't think I can answer that completely after only 2 weeks. It is something that I will have to discover as the project develops and as I collect more references and as the paintings gradually begin to appear. But I know that another challenge will be stopping myself from trying to represent absolutely everything that I see and capturing photos of absolutely everything, because Hamburg is a very large city, and even within this relatively small area, my neighborhood, I found more possibilities and more subjects that I could realistically use. And if I try to include everything that I see, every building, every reflection, or every moment, I'll end up with an enormous collection of images, and I think the purpose of the project could easily become lost inside of it. So part of the process will involve learning what to leave out, and that's very difficult, I think. And perhaps beginning a portrait of a city isn't really about finding the perfect first subject, but rather beginning by looking more carefully at the places that I already know and surround me, collecting photos and possibilities, and slowly discovering which ones actually continue to matter after I return home. So this first block didn't give me all the answers, but it gave me a way to begin. And that to me is super valuable because I know that I'll be committing a ton of my time and energy to this, and I had to start somewhere. So thank you very much for watching this first project journal of this Hamburg project. And I would love to know which of the photographs that I showed you would choose as a starting point for a painting. So let me know in the comments. And if you would like to follow this project as it develops over the coming year, remember to subscribe, comment, like the video, share it with your friends. That really helps me. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.